Hello, this is Richard Wolff, and today we're not talking about a scandal, we're talking about a symptom of how empires collapse, not with invasion, but with arrogance. Breaking tonight, the world gathered, the flag didn't. Johannesburg opened the G20 with 19 leaders on stage and one fluorescent absence. The United States, an empty chair, a half-mast banner, a silence you could measure in basis points. The White House calls it principle. Let's test that claim. Donald Trump announced that no U.S. official would attend as long as human rights abuses in South Africa continue. He framed it as moral clarity. Yet within 12 hours, senior aides greenlit a $50 billion crude and LNG package with a neighboring military regime, exclusive liftings, 20-year offtake, gold index settlement, zero labor safeguards. We defend justice, he said. Then he sold oil. That's not foreign policy. That's a clearance sale. Markets noticed. The dollar index slipped 3.1% in Asian trading. Energy futures spiked 4.6% on headline risk. U.S. autos, steel, and farm exporters who depend on G20 frameworks to police tariffs and logistics watched purchase orders freeze. Two Midwest agribusinesses reported a 17% drop in overseas inquiries in 24 hours. That's the price of performative isolation. America pays, someone else invoices. At the Summit Hall, South Africa projected rotating 3D portraits of the attendees. Where the American head of state should be, the screen read, signal lost. Delegates laughed quietly. Diplomats didn't, because they know what a vacant seat means. If you don't sit at the table, the menu changes without you. Today it did. The Johannesburg Energy Understanding let members settle cross-border power trades in a digital clearing unit that excludes the dollar. Call it what it is. A pilot de-dollarization sandbox made possible by America's tantrum. Trump's defense is simple. We won't legitimize a corrupt circus. But hypocrisy isn't a defense, it's evidence. If the standard is human rights, why handshake a petro junta with live ammunition on its balance sheet? If the standard is sovereignty, why undermine a forum that prevents beggar thy neighbor tariffs? If the standard is strength, why pick a fight with a room you refuse to enter? Let's talk workers. A Detroit EV supplier depends on G20 mutual recognition to move battery components across 3 borders in 5 days. Lose that coordination and the delay becomes 11. Cash cycles extend, payroll tightens, jobs get optimized. A Kansas wheat co-op relies on coordinated food security corridors to guarantee shipped berths during drought. Without them, freight premia jump $18 per ton. That's not an abstraction. That's a paycheck. And allies? Canada issued a one-line statement. Leadership requires presence. Germany flagged systemic risk to rules-based coordination. Japan asked, off camera, is this permanent? Beijing didn't ask anything. Beijing smiled. An empty American chair is an available Chinese seat. It will be occupied. Here's the contradiction this administration can't bury under slogans. If you truly believe global forums are corrupt, you go to confront them, record the votes, whip the coalition, name and shame the spoilers. You don't surrender the microphone and call it courage. Skipping the summit didn't punish South Africa. It punished American workers while gifting our leverage to competitors who showed up. He didn't skip the G20 for justice. He skipped it for a deal. When the flag stopped flying, the empire stopped breathing. And for the first time in a generation, the world exhaled without us. You know, when a government says we're standing for human rights, I always ask whose rights and at what price. That's the question echoing across Washington this week. The Trump administration insists The G20 boycott was a moral stand, but the evidence reads like an invoice from an oil trader, not a manifesto from a democracy. Inside leaked internal memos, aides described the move as strategic realignment, a euphemism for a backdoor energy grab. Within hours of the Johannesburg summit opening, a U.S. consortium registered as Liberty Energy Group signed a memorandum with the Kazara Military Council. The numbers are staggering. $50 billion in long-term extraction rights, zero environmental oversight, tax holidays through 2040, and an expedited export clause that bypasses any congressional review. The kicker? The signing ceremony happened in the same hour Trump posted about white farmers under attack in South Africa. The Moral Theater covered the financial transaction. Classic diversion. Meanwhile, U.S. allies scrambled to interpret the vacuum. France proposed an emergency leadership round to replace America's absent seat. Brazil and India pushed to finalize the Johannesburg Energy Credit System, the world's first cross-border digital energy currency. It launched without the dollar. That's the geopolitical equivalent of deleting America from the spreadsheet. Back home, the consequences were instant. Midwest refineries reported surges in imported crude prices, up 8% overnight. Logistics firms warned of a pricing shockwave as insurers adjusted risk premiums for trade routes now controlled by G20 protocols. One senior economist estimated 320,000 manufacturing jobs could be affected within 6 months if access to multilateral energy markets stays restricted. And yet the White House called it a temporary strategic reset. They said the U.S. would reevaluate participation in biased international structures. Translation: if Trump isn't in control, he'd rather burn the room. Think about that. A president who claims to defend American sovereignty just handed global energy coordination to a bloc of 19 nations, many of them adversaries, because he didn't like the guest list. This isn't sovereignty. It's self-sabotage with a flag wrapped around it. In interviews, administration surrogates defended the decision by invoking the economic nationalism. But nationalism that crashes your own currency isn't a strategy, it's vandalism. Within 3 days, the dollar's trade-weighted value hit its lowest point since 2016. Treasury officials privately called it the Johannesburg shock. Even inside conservative business circles, the backlash grew. One executive from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce admitted off record, it's like watching someone light their own credit rating on fire and call it patriotism. What's emerging isn't leadership, it's isolation packaged as pride. It's a performance built for domestic applause while the rest of the planet quietly rewrites the rules of trade without the United States in the room. And here's the bitter truth. Once those new rules harden, you can't just re-enter the game. You forfeited the seat, the leverage, and the trust. That's what Trump canceled, not just a summit, but the very network that kept America relevant. Let's strip away the flag waving and do the books. Who pays? Who profits? Who bleeds? That's political economy. Start with workers. A Detroit harness plant running 2 shifts last week is idle today. The procurement chief shows me a chart. Cross-border components that used to clear in 5 days now sit 11. Cash conversion cycle up 9 days. Payroll under review. That's not theory. That's a pink slip waiting for a signature. In Wichita, a wheat co-op priced October shipments on dollar-cleared corridors. After the G20 walkout and the new Johannesburg Energy Credit pilot, freight insurers slapped a surcharge. $18 per ton became $27. Margins evaporated. The co-op chair told me flat, we sell food, we just got priced like we move weapons. Look at the tape. Manufacturing PMI dropped 2.4 points in 48 hours. High-yield energy spreads widened 120 basis points. The 10-year jumped 38 bits per second on safe haven confusion, then sank as the dollar slid. A national retailers index flagged a 6% cut in Q4 imports because ports can't price energy surcharges with G19 rules changing daily. That is not a culture war. That is a balance sheet. Ports feel it first. In Savannah, crane operator Jay Kim logs 19 no-show vessels in a week. Carriers rerouted to Cape Town clearances tied to the new digital settlement. In Houston, pilots complain about inconsistent bunker pricing linked to non-dollar LNG swaps. On the West Coast, ILWU locals warn of 5,000 hours lost in a 3-day window. Union pension funds mark a $2 billion paper hit as utilities and shippers wobble. When you cancel a summit, the invoices don't cancel with it. The administration's line is principle. Let's test the principle. If human rights are the red line, why did Treasury sign off on a 20-year oil offtake with Khazara 2 hours after the boycott announcement? Khazara's military council just outlawed independent unions. Journalists detained, 8 in one night. Villages cleared for security corridors around new pipelines, 14. The White House posted, "We stand for justice." The Khazara communique posted, "We stand for delivery." One of those statements comes with bulldozers. Allies are recalculating. Canada accelerated a G19 mutual reliability clause that reroutes emergency power swaps through a euro-cleared hub. The EU moved up phase 2 of the carbon border adjustment by 6 months without EU input, adding a 712% levy on steel, cement, fertilizers with dirty energy footprints. Japan and South Korea quietly repapered LNG contracts with non-US banks to avoid clearing risk. Every line item that used to include the United States now includes an asterisk. Security hawks should pay attention. AFRICOM's logistics map depends on South Atlantic bunkering and multilateral port access. With dollar-cleared energy unsettled and Washington absent from the room writing the rules, convoy premiums ticked up 27% on key lanes. If you want to deter adversaries, you don't raise your own cost of fuel and then argue you're tough. You just taught the world how to raise your costs for free. Inside the C-suite, the revolt is whispers, not speeches. A Midwestern appliance CEO, "We planned around tariffs, we can't plan around tantrums." A rail operator, "If the dollar is optional in energy, it becomes negotiable everywhere." On Wall Street, a prime broker put it colder. "Liquidity is loyalty. If you skip the forum that sustains liquidity, counterparties revise their loyalties." That's the sentence that should keep Americans awake tonight. And then there is the morality play. White House surrogates made white farmers in South Africa the headline. Fine, let's put victims first. Show the data, show the monitors, show the sanctions that target perpetrators. What you showed instead was a contract, oil in, gold out, labor rights zeroed. You can't launder a barrel with a sermon, not when the same day's ledger records a $50 billion embrace of a junta. Call it what it is, selective conscience as commercial strategy. This is the pattern I've taught for decades. Empires don't collapse because others get stronger. They collapse because they choose theater over governance. They trade institutions for clicks. They replace coalitions with contracts and then discover contracts don't vote, don't defend, don't forgive. The boycott wasn't a message to the world. It was a memo to Americans. We are swapping leadership for leverage, and the leverage belongs to whoever turns up to sign. You wanted numbers? Here are numbers. Preliminary job loss risk, 45,000 inches export adjacent manufacturing over 6 months. Working capital stress up 14% among mid-cap industrials. A 9.3% spike in average container insurance premia on Africa Atlantic routes. And one more number, 0 American negotiators in the room that just rewired part of global energy settlement. 0. That's not a policy, that's an abdication. You can chant sovereignty until the microphones crackle, but sovereignty without presence is solitude. And solitude is not strategy, it's surrender wrapped in a flag. Power doesn't vanish, it relocates. If you leave the room, someone else holds the gavel. Basic economics, basic geopolitics of follow the money. After the boycott, the Johannesburg Energy Credit, JEC, went live with pilot volumes of 220 million megawatt hour equivalent in week 1. By day 10, 6 national utilities cleared spot power in JEC, not dollars. 2 state oil firms priced floating LNG cargoes with a JEC collar. U.S. traders watched from the sidelines, calculating slippage they couldn't hedge. This isn't a think tank paper. It's a spread on your energy bill. Now the legality. The $50 billion Kazara package wasn't just reckless. It was routed through an emergency national interest waiver stitched to a procurement rule meant for disaster relief. Congressional committees learned after the fact. No labor review, no human rights certification, a carve out for confidential financial instruments pegged to bullion. If a union local tried to negotiate terms in the dark like this, management would call it bad faith. When the White House does it, they call it leadership. The moral claim? We stood for human rights. Then why gag your own diplomats? Multiple missions received a do not engage. Cable hours before the summit. No corridor talks. No side sessions. No joint statements. That's not standing for anything. That's refusing to stand in public while signing in private. The choreography is the confession. Allies recalibrate in boardrooms, not press conferences. Canada's grid operator shifted 12% of cross-border balancing to a euro-cleared hub within 72 hours. The EU advanced its green industry guarantee, ring-fencing clean tech procurement from jurisdictions deemed procedurally unreliable. Translation, U.S. bids face a trust discount. Japan widened a silent swap line with India to backstop non-dollar LNG. South Korea moved tankage for strategic stocks to ports aligned with G19 settlement. These aren't speeches, these are exits. And workers? The letters pile up. A machinist in Ohio, OT cut supervisor says, Johannesburg shock. We didn't vote for Johannesburg. A longshore steward in California, we can live with tariffs. We can't live with rules changing mid-voyage. A farmer in Nebraska sends a photo. Wheat in storage, bills in arrears, a sticky note rate plus 9% since boycott. They're not asking for ideology. They're asking for solvency. Markets encode contempt faster than pundits. Cross-currency basis widened against the dollar. A top 3 index provider floated criteria to include JEC-linked instruments in an experimental EM benchmark. If the benchmark accepts it, asset allocators follow it. If allocators follow it, liquidity migrates. Liquidity is policy without a vote. Ask any central banker. Meanwhile, the culture war packaging keeps rolling. Surrogates say globalists forced America to kneel. No. Coordination isn't kneeling. It's leverage. When the flag is in the room, it sets terms. When it's absent, terms are set for it. That's the part the sloganeers never explain to the people whose shifts and mortgages depend on predictable rules. Inside the administration, the spin grows brittle. A leaked slide deck hails sovereign energy renaissance with bullet points that would embarrass a freshman seminar. Cut out middlemen. i.e., price power our way outside the forum that prices power. Win headlines. Markets follow. Markets don't follow headlines. Markets follow settlement systems and enforcement capacity. You forfeited both. Security hawks can stop pretending there's a firewall between economics and deterrence. Fleet readiness depends on fuel cost, port access, insurance clearance, and allied basing. Raise the cost, forfeit the access, and you have less deterrence at a higher price. Adversaries won't celebrate on television. They'll shave a nickel off your balance sheet on every gallon and smile in silence. Here's the through line, and it's ugly. The boycott was sold as principle, executed as procurement, and paid for by workers. The oil contract was sold as America first, structured as oversight last, and collateralized by gold because even its architects don't trust the stability they're creating. And the empty flag doctrine, it's not a slogan. It's an operating system. Exit the institution, monetize the vacuum, externalize the costs. So let's name the trade. Prestige for price. We surrendered agenda-setting power to book a one-off barrel haul with a junta. We swapped a seat at the world's table for a seat at a private signing table. We replaced diplomacy with an invoice and called it morality. And for what? A short-term headline, a weaker currency, a louder echo chamber. The empire didn't just stop breathing. It started panting short, shallow, unsustainable. That's not strength. That's exhaustion with branding. In political economy, you measure power by outcomes, not slogans. So let's close with outcomes. Outcome one, rulemaking. The United States did not show up. G19 wrote energy settlement rules without us. JEC pilot volume crossed 500 million megawatt hour equivalent by day 14. 6 SOEs posted guidance in non-dollar collars. 3 exchanges listed JEC basis futures. That's institutional cement. Once it dries, chisels don't work. You don't bully your way back in with a press conference. Outcome 2, pricing. Retail power in 5 U.S. metros ticked up 6.9% on forward adjustments. Diesel rack prices added 12 cents in a week. Container insurance premia on Atlantic Africa lanes rose 9.3%. Trucking spot rates followed. Small manufacturers hear the sound first. Forklifts idling. This is how a boycott turns into a payroll cut quietly, mechanically, predictably. Outcome 3, credibility. Allies now price a U.S. attendance discount into negotiations. If you may skip the room, they hedge the risk you'll skip the deal. France built a contingency block. Japan and Korea expanded non-U.S. energy backstops. Canada recoded cross-border power swaps to Euro hubs. These are not press releases. These are escape hatches. Outcome 4, morality, weaponized. The White House claimed human rights in South Africa, then inked a $1.50 oil pact with a junta that outlaws unions and jails reporters. If that is principle, water burns. Selective conscience is not a policy. It's a sales pitch. And it came with bullion collateral, which is another way of saying even the signers don't trust the currency consequences of their own stunt. So what now? I don't do fantasy. I do levers. 3 levers remain, and they are closing. Lever 1, re-entry with receipts. Show up physically at the next ministerial with a hard package. Labor side letters, energy transit guarantees, and a swap window for dollar JEC convertibility capped by the Fed. Put numbers on paper. Markets obey enforceable math, not adjectives. Lever 2, clawback oversight, force daylight onto the Kazara Pact, committee subpoenas, labor audits, human rights reporting, sunset clauses. If it survives scrutiny, it won't survive sunlight. If it survives sunlight, own the cost in public. Either way, restore the idea that deals answer to voters, not to private lighting at Mar-a-Lago. Lever 3, protect workers now. Emergency export credit for firms hit by G19 routing. Temporary insurance backstop for energy-linked shipping. Overtime stabilization grants tied to payroll retention. This is triage, not ideology. You keep the real economy breathing while you fix the mistake that collapsed its lungs. Will any of this happen? Not if the administration keeps selling theater as strategy. America First is not a magic spell. It's an accounting identity. Value in must exceed value out, or the phrase is a lie. Right now, value out is leadership, credibility, and wage stability. Value in is a photo op and a gold indexed contract with a regime that fears unions more than drought. And to those who say the world needs us, I offer the hardest sentence of this broadcast. The world prefers a present United States to an absent superpower. Presence is leverage. Absence is permission. Permission for others to price you, route around you, and eventually replace you. This is Richard Wolff. We just audited a boycott. The numbers don't care about flags. Either we return to the room or the room will return a verdict on us. He didn't skip the G20 for justice. He skipped it for a deal. When the flag stopped flying, the empire stopped breathing, the market wrote the obituary.